Hi, this is Mike, making my video to add to my collection. Today's 4:30, 2025, and it's 11:16 p.m. Uh, basically, I'm making this video because I'm talking about the mind uh, and how it pertains to the universe around it. The universe being a reflection of the mind, uh, in all its forms. Um, you know, People are basically a reflection of you, and of course, uh, projections of you. There's a lot of NPC, non-playable characters in the game, and of course, we're playing a game, and we're all connected by, uh, connectivity with our minds. We're all connected, and we're all playing the same game, pretty much. And if you imagine like Grand Theft Auto and stuff like that, you got non-playable characters, but then you approach the character and you talk to it, and it talks back. You know, um, all that really is a CPU. And of course, I put words in people's mouths. And they said exactly what I wanted them to say. So, and they were at vast differences. Sometimes people, radio announcers said exactly what I wanted them to say. It was profane. But the thing is, I had them say it. So the thing is, there's that, and then of course people that approach me or whatever. So I put thoughts in people's minds and words in their mouth. And the only evidence of that is they said what I wanted to say. Or they gave me what I wanted them to give me, or I had an influence on them, even though I didn't say anything. So your thoughts are very powerful, and your thoughts basically equate to your reality. And I've had it to you play Minecraft and it populates the whole landscape. Before you play the game, and it's almost like no two landscapes are the same. They're just made up as you play the game, and it's almost like that with the world in a lot of ways too. There are things about it, that are definitely independent of other people, and there's stuff that you and only you can really create, and they're things that you have created. Solid objects, and of course, players in the game, of course, have talked to spirits, and they just materialized. And it stands to reason that they came from me and my mind. And I've had dreams about, people. I had this one. It was a photograph. It was a artist rendition. Basically or CGI generated image. And I kept studying it for the longest time. And then there was this girl that was very similar to that. It's almost like she was that same being. But I went to sleep, and then I had this dream, and I thought it was my stepmom walking down the hallway, and I had a lot of dread. But it was actually that girl, and she come walking down the hallway, and I was in a trailer house, and I was looking out the window. After the fact that she spoke to me, and we had a conversation, and I looked out the window, and there's my green truck, and I said, "Do you like that green truck that I got for you, or whatever?" I bought her a truck, and I told her, I said, "Don't sell it." And she said, "No, I won't." And she came walking down the hallway, just a beautiful redhead. And so anyway, I seen that, and she had this guy that was with her. But it's so realistic, I couldn't differentiate between that and reality. And there were other dreams too, that I've had that were like that. So it tells me that this universe that we live in, this outward expression of my mind, is just that. It's an outward expression, and uh, there's different levels that are added to the waking state. But let's say things are tangible or whatever, and they do have physical properties. but all they really are is electrical impulses to your mind. There is no, the brain is just basically surrounded by darkness, and then your eyes give it light. And your dreams become a reality. So the Apostle Paul would say, uh, God's strength is made perfect in his weakness. And, basically, he boasted about his infirmities. And, if you think about it, that's really ultimately what the subconscious mind does. The ego basically uh, gives you a false narrative about who you are, and gives you an inflated ego and stuff like that, because it's a survival mechanism. And then of course there's that, and of course there's the subconscious mind. When you're in a state of lack, uh, the subconscious mind makes it available. It might be a powerful delusion that is a manifestation of your mind. That's really what this whole universe is major. It's just a hallucination, and that's everything about it. So, in a state of surrender, basically you have infirmities, and you basically your weakness, and your weakness is God's strength. But that weakness, and then talking about God, well, God being your mind, and God is inside you and outside you, the Alpha and Omega. But ultimately, the outward expression is more or less uh, your conscious mind, and your subconscious mind is your creative mind. And it says that God's foolishness is greater than man's wisdom. So what they're getting at is, when they were writing about that stuff, is they were talking about the two minds. And of course, when they become one, that's when you can move mountains. And that's when you see things that are a lot of people aren't able to see, and you can hear things that most people can't hear. So you have eyes to see and ears to hear. So in a state of weakness, your subconscious mind creates an overflow of DMT, and that DMT is a psychoactive element, more or less mind expanding. And then when that happens, you have expansiveness, and you have euphoria and bliss, and all the things associated with that. It collapses away function. You see uh, supernatural things happen. That just, your windows of heaven, your eyes are open, and it pours down a blessing so big you can't contain it. So, with that being said, you get all the inputs, the impressions that you have throughout the day or week or month or year or 10 years or 5 years or whatever. And all those things, basically are in your subconscious mind, and they're stored in there. And then what happens is when you go to sleep, it's expressed in your dream state. And then, of course, when you're awake, those same things can be expressed. And so, anyway, you study something long enough, it starts to manifest in your dream state. I used to be around people all the time, and I started seeing those people in my dream state. And, it was, needless to say, it wasn't necessarily that same person that was in my dream. It wasn't their consciousness. All it was is a manifestation, a conjuring of my mind that created it, and it's put those actors in my dream state. But, I watched the movie Inception, and it was talking about how this guy had a girlfriend and stuff like that was in the dream state, and then he had kids and all that, and he had a whole kingdom. And anyway, the whole thing is when he was coming out of that dream state, the whole kingdom started crashing down. And that's, more or less what my dreams are like. I'll have a very beautiful woman in it, and I'll talk to her, and she interacts with me, and then, I wake up. I'm still thinking about her, and I'm communicating with her. But, I can actually see her image, and it's almost like she got burnt up, completely destroyed. And I was saddened by that. And, it's no different than when this world comes to an end. That's really what would happen to all the people, is that they would just disintegrate. and die off. And that's a dream. And of course, your subconscious mind dreams as well in its dream state. You have your eyes, and then you have a third eye, which has cones and rods in it. And, it's capable of seeing things in the dream state. And when you're awake, it's capable of seeing things. You're capable of seeing things in the waking state. And the two become one. And, the male and female energies blend together, and you're stoic. You're not necessarily all male. Sometimes you have the compassion of a woman with the strength of a man. And of course, they become one mind. And the outward expression and the inward expression become one. And so your creative side and your rational side, become one. So really it says a slave is no greater than its master, meaning that, let's say for example, the subconscious mind being the slave or the servant. And it does all these beautiful things, but then again, the master and the slave are one. And then that's when the magic truly happens, is when they're both enacted. So anyway, that's all it really is. It's just a manifestation of the mind. And of course, you have unfolding of things, and you start shedding off all the excess weight, the dead weight, the fat gets cut off, and then, the dross gets burned off, and the chaff gets separated from the wheat, and it's burned off. And when I say burnt, they're saying that what happens is the Kundalini fire, the mania, the inflated part of yourself, basically does all that. But then what happens after it's all said and done is sometimes you take a loss, but then most generally that loss is equated to spiritual mysteries and stuff like that happen. And it's an exchange from one set of things to another, but more often than not it's tenfold. And might not be something that is tangible, but it arises in your mind, and then basically it's projected in the outward world. And then of course no hand has really touched it, it's sacred. So anyway, there's that. And then all those things that were burned off, you have something that's more refined and packed down and set in your lap. So might be less in some ways, but then again it's refined. So you might have a clear, concise operating system after it's all said and done. And then of course, with that being said, you have a more refined way of looking at things. Once the genie's been let out of the bottle, it can't be put back in. And it's a one-way gate. You can't really go back to the way things were. The wheels are set in motion. You're past the point of no return. You can't go past go and collect $200 all the time. You have to go keep striving ahead. And eventually it gets to the point where you come to a place of rest. And, you really, what that means is contentment. When you take away from my desires, then you're adding to my wealth. And if you no longer have all these nagging desires, you feel less weighted down, and things are better. And it's contentment. It's not necessarily euphoria. Sometimes you do have euphoria, which is a major release of suffering. But eventually you come to equilibrium and a place of rest. And when that's being done, you have contentment. And then, you can live happily ever after, but it doesn't necessarily mean euphorically ever after. It means happily ever after. So you just have simpler hobbies, and you refine your life, and things become easier, and smooth sailing. So I've been to the top of the mountain, and yes, it was good, but it doesn't always have to be up, up, up. Sometimes you do kind of settle for less, and you become the tail instead of the head. So anyway, that's all I got to say.